Peace, and power, family. Dr. Dennis Assault Winkler, back at you again. I wanted to just jump in here and have a conversation, talk about Brother Tyre Nichols, the officers that murdered him, all these type of things. I really don't know exactly where I want to go with this, but what I do want to say from the onset is one of the problems with this idea called race is that it's too simple. Many of us look at race and racism as being one real, and let me back up. Race being a real biological thing, which kind of muddies the impact of race and what race was actually created for, which we see show up, and racism is a real thing, resulting from or supported by this idea of race. Now, I'm not suggesting that we can get rid of this construct called race, because it's very real in our social realities. Now, there's this talk about whether these black officers, there's pointing fingers about, there's a lot of people pointing fingers and saying that, what do you say now that you have black officers murdering a black young man? Now, that doesn't really change my thoughts about racism for what racism truly is. Some call white supremacy, some call other things. It just doesn't change my idea, because I never looked at racism as being uniquely and only carried out by white people, those who we identify as white people. See, because racism, again, is more complex than, it's complex because it's not, race is not real. So because race is not real on a physical realm, it's real on a psychological, social realm, it creates some confusion. And sometimes we put too much emphasis on biology as it pertains to race versus what race truly is, which is a social thing. And race being social means that, or a social construct, that one can adopt the principles of the dominant group or oppressive group, and even try their best to become a member of that group. It's a real thing. Even if you have skin color like me, you can try your damnedest to be a part of the dominant culture. You can be, and I'm not suggesting that all officers are going in and really wanting to be a part of that dominant culture. However, it's very difficult not to, when the system itself was built on racist ideas. In fact, it's even more the case when we go out into these streets and work every day in some of the most harshest conditions, we can get sucked into the ideas of white supremacy, if I can use that term. Because racism is not only practiced or supported or maintained by those who have certain skin colors. I want to, people can say, I want to be, not me, but people want to be a part of that game. People want to be a part of the dominant winning team. In fact, there's something called internalized racism, as we know. And what does that mean? Internalized racism is when you adopt the ideology, the worldview, the opinions of the quote-unquote dominant culture, whether you be identified physiologically or biologically as a part of that culture. So that looks like a black person who's been identified as a black person now looking at the world through the lenses of his or her or the oppressive group. You know, I want this to be a conversation. Now, who wants to talk? Who wants to talk? Petey Green. You want to talk? So I wanted this to be a conversation because I'm not necessarily as I don't necessarily have this all really thought out about how I really want to approach this. But I know that it's not a simple conversation. And because it's not a simple conversation, I don't think, I think we get in trouble trying to make this a simple conversation. It's not that simple. And I think to some degree we have to evolve our understanding of what this thing called or this construct of race truly is. Because it works. See, my fear is always that if we look at race as a simple reality and and even racism, then it backfires on us at some point. And I think people are trying to allow racism or or or, or they're trying to say, well, what do you say now? Since these are black officers, is this racism? The argument could be made. Well, let me go back and say what I was saying. Some would say, is this racism? You know, and I think the argument could be made that yes, it's still racism. You know what I mean? Because the reality is, racism is not only practiced by something happened to my camera, y'all. How do I fix this? Well, I don't know what to do here. Okay, so racism is not only practiced by or supported or maintained or sustained by those of who are identified as white people. Now, when I look at anyone who's caught up in this idea of racism or race, who really don't understand the complexity of it, I feel like we're all victims of it. So when I look at racism, I look at racism as being tantamount to oppression. Race just being something, one form of oppression to control people. There's many, you know, it's or one symbols, one aspect to separate people. So when we look at race, again, we have to look at it very complex, not simple. Because again, Black Box, where you at? You want to try to come in here today? When we look at race in a very simple manner, this is what happens. We have people, I'm a part of some counseling listservs, and someone sent out a message saying that we should speak out against all black, uh, uh, um, 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 let's say, Black Lives Matter always. It doesn't matter who killed a person. Yes, and that's true. Black lives do matter. But I still would argue that this is a result of an oppressive system, and racism being just one aspect of oppression, hegemony, not the only form of hegemony or oppression. It's just an opportunity, as one of my mentors would say. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to look at some difference and make people or separate people depending on skin color. You do this in many different ways, financially. And let me say, the interesting thing is that this racism thing has worked so well for, quote unquote, the oppressors, that your skin color many times correlates with other forms of oppression, such as financial oppression, such as class oppression. Now, the problem is when we begin to think that there's other people who don't also fall in those categories, and that we make race too real, where we believe that, I mean, that when we get lost between race being a construct and race being an idea, an ideology, to dominate, divide, and confuse people. Not just to confuse people, but to abuse people, to misuse people. And hence, these officers, from my little understanding of them, and I know this might not be popular, but also are victims of this oppressive society. I'm not sure what goes on in their mind. I'm not sure what they were thinking or what they think. I'm not even sure. I'm hearing some other stories about some things could have took place, or it could have been some girlfriends. I don't know if that stuff is true. But what I do know is that there's even, a fatigue that happens. There's even if you work with people long enough and you don't see change, and you're working in the community and you're working in the streets, you can begin to get burnt out, and you can begin to adopt the ideas that black people are worthless. I'm saying black people, even who work in the communities, at some point can begin to say that this work is useless. And they start saying words like niggas. You can't do nothing for niggas. You know how many people have come to me who say, I used to do what you do, brother. They said, pardon me. They said, brother, I used to do what you do. I used to be out there, but you can't change that. And this is the mindset after being burnt out, trying to help people in a society that is so oppressive, that knows that there's going to be burnout, and constantly feeding subconsciously ideas into your mind that black people are no good, that black people are lazy, that black people are criminals, that black people and slaves are synonymous. You know, it's a psychological war, a social psychological war that goes on. And as long as we get confused at looking at race as in a very simple manner and really reactionary and utilizing it the same way as oppressors use it, we will continue to have these. I'm trying to be careful in what I'm saying here because I don't want to be misunderstood. But we will continue to have it used against us. And we'll say, so again, in this case, these black officers have hurt people. They hurt a black man. This is what this is what people are going to say. They hurt this black man. These black officers. So now they're suggesting that you can't call this racism, but I am suggesting you can. And again, as I say, I'm not sure if these officers was facing internalized racism or whatever the idea was, but I do know that there's a high possibility that they could have been experiencing burnout. They could have, some of them could have internalized some things. But also this level of aggression, they're talking about this scorpion crew. This society is brutal. This society is aggressive. So all of us in this society tend to pick up these characteristics that aggression is the best way to handle things. So even if we take out race, again, I just call it oppression. I just think race is one form of oppression. And it's often confuses us because we think it's a biological reality, which is also a part of the oppression because they want to keep us confused. They want us to look at things in very simple manners of black, white, yellow, this, that, and the other. And not really looking at it as oppression. Let me see. My brother Kevin says here, I mean, my phone is off the chain today. What is going on? Um, what happened? What happened is to be expected based on the climate or the burnout. Brother Kevin, if you could expand on that a little bit more, I would appreciate it. And I'm trying to be clear here, family. I keep saying the same thing over because race, I want you to understand that we hold to it so strongly and we make our decisions lots of times exclusively on race, and then we do what the oppressor has done and we attribute things to skin color, the texture of one's hair. We even uh, 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 um, um, contribute things to people's level of education and people's gender and all these things. When we continue to look at the world from these very narrow lenses, we'll always be confused, misused, and abused. When we look at things in such a narrow manner, I mean, we'll be played all the time because the reality is that it's just not true. It's just not true. It is not true that we can look at one's skin color and determine what he or she will do. See, I've talked to brothers who said, well, I will trust this one because they're this color. I won't trust that one because they're that color. Now, how do we use that when we look at this situation? How can we say that? See, that sounds good, but the reality is that is We think that we're being revolutionary by saying that. But we're not being revolutionary by saying that. What we're doing is falling into the trap that the powers or the oppressors have set for us. We have to look at things and not get confused by attributing certain ideas, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and actions to things such as one's skin color, one's gender, one's uh, sexuality, one's income status, one's the neighborhood that one lives in. We have to look at things more complex. And what I want to do, family, since there's not much interaction here, because I wanted to have a conversation, and I'm still trying to get these ideas out of my mind, out of my heart. I'm trying to really have some dialogue, some conversation around this. And it's difficult for me to come and just say simple things because this is not simple. And that's what I want to leave you with. This is not simple. The world we operate in is not simple. The confusion that is caused is not simple. Let me see what Sister Queen says here. She says, only racism would subvert your connection to your culture of your people in which you internalize white. Let's see here. Okay, excuse me. She said, only racism would subvert your connection to your culture of people in which you internalize white oppressancy, no such thing as white supremacy, in which you can stalk, beat, and kill someone that is literally you. A prime example that the social experiment of race is not real and nullifies when power, oppression, and internalized European brutality initiatives are present. I'm not. I think I'm following you, Sister Queen. But and I think I can. If I'm following, I think I agree with you. I'm not sure if I can say only racism would subvert the connection of your culture. I think that lots of things can do that. Capitalism, I believe, can be a major something to subvert your culture. And I agree that I'm careful with using the word white supremacy. I'm even careful with using the word privilege, because to me, some of these terms always, although we're trying to call a thing out, they support the idea that there's something supreme about these people, or there's a privilege in being ignorant. That's what I call it. And I'm also clear that saying only, and I see Sister Queen, you start off only, that I think there's, again, many things that can subvert it. Like, some people even have this debate around uh, gender. What do I have to choose? You have to choose something. You have to choose your gender before you choose your culture. So then you also have this idea of religion, right? And some would say that if you have to take part in this religion, you have to forego your cultural practices. You understand? And I could see how one could say that racism could be tied in all of that. But I think before there was even a thing called race, we had these issues. Again, race becomes another way to oppress, in a very, I'm going to say, powerful way to oppress people. People have been oppressed by this idea of race, probably more than any other way. I mean, I don't. I'm just saying probably, because I know some would argue that it's just another form of capitalism, or some would also argue that capitalism came about as a result of racism, and so on and so forth. But what I'm I think that oppression is the overall overarching issue. I don't. It doesn't. Oppression has existed for forever, and we find new ways to oppress people, and people want to be a part of the winning team, and that's the problem. We're operating in a world that we feel like we have to fight for everything, compete with everyone. So of course, if I'm black, I'm going to try to pass. I mean, things like that. People try to become a part of something. You know, people want to be a part of a winning team. So you join the police force. Now you adopt that mentality. You 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 come a part of that culture, even. Because even if some people will call that the blue body, the blue body officers are part of the blue body. A white and a black officer can come together and still share culture as it pertains to being police officers. If you ever talk to people who went into the military or the Marines or different sects of the military, they will share with you their experience as becoming brothers or sisters in their specific military branch of the military. So it's many ways. There's gangs out here in the streets. There's gangs all the way up from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. There's all these gangs, us against them. This mentality is pervasive in our culture. And because it's so pervasive in our culture, we emulate it. And we think it's just normal. When it's brutal, it's oppressive, and it causes lots of trauma. So again, racism is deeper than skin color. You don't have to be a white person to carry out or be an agent of of a racist, oppressive system. So the system itself is problematic. In many instances, many of us and all of us are to some degree complicit. But the reality is we have to do our best to dismantle this system. We have to do our best. Will it completely go away? I can't say that. And that's beyond this conversation. But I think there will always be a war. There will always be those who are standing up and fighting for humanity, and those in opposition. And those in opposition are those who view the world in from very dogmatic lenses, and typically see others, and anybody can become the other. Bearded brothers could become the other. So they find others as enemies, and then join they join and collaborate together and corroborate against the other. They you There's it's so much going on out here that we typically just look for the other, and there has to be somebody else, and there has to be an enemy, and all that type of thing. I mean, it doesn't stop. Even inside of your own race, it doesn't stop. Even, you can just go and Google it. You will see that there's many wars being fought to say you're either with me or against me. You're either with us or against us. There's people that are biracial who have groups against other biracial people. There's people who are black that have groups that speak against other black groups. There's police officers who form this uniting force and say we're brothers against those civilians. Those who go in the military are many times indoctrinated to say we are brothers against those others. So, but all this is oppression. So again, my point is that I think what could help us out many times is looking at oppression as being oppression, and racism, other aspects of oppression is just opportunities to find some difference and have people competing against one another. Until next time, fam, I'm gonna sign out here. I thank you all for jumping in here and really dealing and really bearing with me as I try to really think this thing out um, loud, as I tried to think this out loud. Um, Thanks for your input. For those who gave input, thanks you, Sister Queen from Black Box. Um, Thanks everybody for jumping in. Um, you know, I'm gonna try to go live more. You know, hopefully it won't be as unclear as today. But today is really, I'm really just trying to think out loud, and I just again think it's very important that we don't get deluded by this idea of race. It's real in the social world. It's not the only form of oppression, but it is a very powerful form of oppression. And I know why we want to unite around certain concepts such as race, and I think that we have to. But at the same time, I realize that if we look at it in very limited in ways, that it will be used against us. Peace.